Good morning. Today we are continuing on working with those numbers. We are working on CO6. I can add and subtract decimals. So working on the stacking with the decimals when we were ordering them from least to greatest, we're going to really be thinking about that with the stacking because that stacking plays a part with our adding and subtracting. Prior knowledge, why do you think I'm saying that? Why does stacking play a key role? What do we have to do when we add and subtract decimals? James? We have to line up those decimal points. Oh my goodness, every year I have kids that forget to line up decimal points and we get the totally wrong answer. So I really need for us to follow what I'm doing. What I write on the board up here, I need you to be putting the same thing in your binder. Adding and subtracting decimals is very similar to adding and subtracting multi-digit numbers that you've been doing for years. 145 plus 256. We know how to line up the ones place, the tens place, the hundreds place, and add our multi-digit numbers. The numbers are lined up vertically by their place value and the columns are added or subtracted. You may or may not need to carry the addition or borrow for subtraction. So if you have 3 minus 5, so 53 minus 45, we have to borrow a tens place to move it over to the ones place so we have enough to borrow from so we don't go into negative numbers. So we might need to carry or borrow. Be sure that you line up your decimal points, and with addition and subtraction, the decimal drops straight down to your answer. So you always have to make sure you line up decimal points. What do we do if we end up with an empty space? Bennett? Fill it in with a 0. Okay, those empty spaces you fill in with a 0. Check your answer by first making sure it's reasonable. If I'm looking at 7.92 plus 3.11, is a 4 in my ones place a reasonable answer? Is a 4 in the ones place? 7 plus 3. It's addition. So you have to always look back. I said 4 in the ones place, that would be subtracting. Every year I have friends that we have adding and subtracting in the same section and people forget to look at the operation. Always check, what is my operation? Is that what I'm doing? And ask yourself, does my answer make sense? Does it seem reasonable? So let's look at how we're going to add or subtract. The first two problems are pretty basic. We can do that. Then we get to our problem over here and we go, oh, wait a minute. I have to line them up. So I have to look at how am I going to rewrite this. I do not want mental math. I want you to show your work. I don't want you just looking at it saying, okay, it equals this. Because one, you're not showing me that you know what you're doing. You can use a calculator and get that answer. I don't want to know if the calculator knows how to do it. I want to know that you know how to do it. So I need to see your work. So you are going to line up your numbers. You're going to say 1, 2, 4.5. And we're going to line up our decimal point. So I have a 0 in the ones place, a 6 in the tens place, 4 in the tenths, and a 4 in the hundredths. So make sure your ones are lined up, your hundreds, your tens are lined up, your tenths, and your hundredths. Then you can go through and you can say, all right, I'm going to fill in a 0 in my empty spaces so I know what I'm adding or subtracting from. I'm going to double check. Oh, this one is an addition problem. So I am going to add 0 plus 4 is 4. 5 plus 4 is 9. 4 plus 0 is 4, 2 plus 6 is 8, 1 plus 0 is 1, and I am going to bring that decimal point straight down. So my hundredths, my tenths, my ones, tens, and hundredths all line up. Does that make sense? Now I'm going to look at my next one. I have 86.92. I'm going to line up that decimal point. Tenths, hundredths, ones, and tens. And I'm going to double check my operation. That is subtracting. So now I can do my subtracting. If you want, you can bring that decimal down first thing. Because that's a given. That decimal point will always be in that spot. So you can just bring that decimal point straight down. 2 minus 2 is 0. 9 minus 2 is 7. 6 minus 7, if I have 6, I can't take 7 away from it. What do I have to do, Jillian?
You make it into 16, and then the 8, it becomes a 7.
Yeah, I'm going to borrow a 10 from that 8. So now it's not 80, it's 70. And I'm going to bring that 10 over to my 16 to make it, to my 6 to make it into a 16. So now I'm going to say, okay, 16 minus 7, that I can do, that's a 9. And 7 minus 3 is 4. So does it make sense to say 86 minus 37 is 49? Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay, so that's my checkpoint. Does it sound right? If I was over here and I had my 124.5 plus 60.44, and I added, and I said, okay, 124.5 plus 60, does that equal 72? That's my checkpoint. Does it make sense? Does 124 plus anything, is that going to go down to 72? No, that's going to tell me I made a mistake. That checkpoint, what mistake did I make, Melina?
I don't know. I'm just asking why the 0 is over the 1 on the second one.
Oh, it's not a 0. That was, if you remember, I circled the subtraction to tell me what operation I was doing. So I had circled it, and then I did my problem. So I just circled the operation to make sure I was putting the right operation down here, to make sure I remembered I was subtracting. Because it's really easy when you have mixed operations to forget, oh, I just added, I'm adding again. Always double check that operation. I circled it just as a reminder, oh, I'm subtracting on this one. I need to make sure it's a subtracting problem. Who knows what mistake I made in my blue here? Because 124 plus 60 is not going to give me 72. What mistake did I make, Judy? Not subtraction. Math. I didn't line up my decimals. I lined up my numbers all to the left, but I did not line up my decimal points. So I added my hundredths to a tens place. So always make sure that those decimal points line up, because otherwise you're going to get a very wrong answer. So line up your decimal points. Check your answers. Like I said, I just looked at it and said 124 plus 60. I shouldn't have an answer of 72. It doesn't make sense. So when it says check your answer first by making sure it's reasonable, that's what it means. Look at it. Does it make sense? And then you can use the calculator to double check, did I do the correct adding and subtracting? But you have to show your work. You cannot just put an answer. We're not just using a calculator to get our answer. All right, let me scroll up. Sometimes it's easier to count up when figuring change. For example, you buy something that is $12.30 and pay with the $20. It takes 70 cents to get to 13 and $7 to get to 20. So your change will be $7.70. Practice this method on each situation below, or use the standard method explained above. Show your work.
We don't have the same thing as you. No, we do. If you just skip.
Oh, I scrolled up too far. Okay, thank you. I just scrolled too quickly. Surely at some point in your life you have purchased something and needed change. The amount of change you will receive is the price of the item subtracted from the amount of money you gave. For each situation below, find the amount of change. Show and check your work. What operation are we going to be doing for each of these? Subtraction. Okay, it's the price subtracted from the amount of money that you gave. So you start with the amount of money that you're giving. I'm giving it $20. I'm going to take away the price. I'm going to subtract it away. So we always start with the amount of money you're giving to the cashier. So if the price is $7.50 and what's given is $10, how should I set up my problem?
You put $10, and you put $7.50, and you put a zero over the
Put a zero where?
Oh no, you're subtracting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you put the $7.50 under it.
So the big thing to remember, when you're given a whole number like 10, where does my decimal go? Because I'm supposed to be lining up decimals. Jillian, where does my decimal
It's
go?
at the end of the zero.
Yeah, it's after the ones place. So your decimal point is always after that ones place. So if you're not given a decimal point, you know it goes after the ones place. Because we need to line up those decimals. So my next number has a decimal and I want to line up my decimal. And then Aiden's right, we fill in zeros into our empty spaces. Remember that we are subtracting. So now I need to subtract it. 0 minus 0 is 0. 0 minus 5. Can't do it. So what do I have to do, A and B? I have to borrow. Well, there's nothing in the, I can't borrow from a 0. So I have to go all the way out here and that 1 becomes a 0. I'm going to shift that 10 over. Now I can borrow from my 10. It's going to turn into a 9. And that's going to turn into a 10. So sometimes you have to borrow in order to get to it when you have all those zeros. Now I have 10 minus 5 is 5, shifting down my decimal point. 9 minus 7 is 2. And now I have 0 minus nothing, so that's going to be 0. So what is my answer? I need to put my dollar sign there so I know that it's dollars. My answer is $2.50. Aiden?
Do we have to show a word?
Well, when the directions say show and check your work, do we have to do it?
Yes.
Sure do. It is super important that we read all the directions and we follow all the directions. On the test, like on the power standards test that we took at the beginning of the year, and we had equivalent fractions, and it said if it is not equivalent, show an equivalent fraction. I had people that didn't write the equivalent fraction, and they got it wrong. On a test, you always have to make sure you're following the directions. On the bottom, it says sometimes it's easier to count up. For example, $12.30, you might say, okay, that would be 70 cents. So that gets me to 13. And then from 13 to 20, that's $7. So I know my answer is $7.70. But you're going to have to show it how you're doing your work. If you're going to do the counting up, you have to show how you did it with the counting up. or you can do the same method that we're doing up here. So whichever one makes more sense to you. If you say, I know subtracting my given and subtracting it by the price, I got it, I can do that, then do that. But everybody's brain works a little bit differently. Some of us would rather count up because that comes easier for us. So then do the counting up. Say, you could say 3.25 plus 0.75 gives me the $4. And then $4 plus $1 equals $5. So I know that it's $1.75. For my brain, that's more complicated. But I get my brain is not all of your all's brains. You guys come up with way better stuff than me sometimes. So if that's the way that works for you, do the counting up method. But if you're like me and you say, yeah, I know this way, I know subtracting, I'm going to take my given and I'm going to subtract the price, I got it, then do that. This one says either way. So you could practice this method or use the standard method. So if you know the standard method, then just keep doing that. Okay? Keep it simple for yourself. If you don't understand that counting up, don't do it. But if it makes sense to you, then do that. Yes, Jillian?
Do we put the given number on the top or the bottom?
So when it says given, that's how much money you're giving to the cashier.
Oh, okay.
So I'm giving the cashier $10 and the price was $7.50. How much is the cashier gonna give me in change? How much will they give back? So yes, the given amount is our bigger number. That's the amount that we're giving to the cashier. So that goes on top. We're gonna subtract out the price of our whatever. And the answer is how much change the cashier will give back to you. So you put your given on top, subtract out your price, and then you have your answer. That was a good question. Any other questions? Do you have a question, Melina?
So we're rounding?
No rounding. No rounding at all. We are straight up subtracting.
Oh, okay.
James?
Do we have to get a calculator check?
No. But here's my challenge to you. Do you want to know if you got your answer correct?
Yeah.
Is it going to be important on the test that you get your answer correct? Should we get in the habit of checking our work? Because it's going to come in handy when we get to the test. When we're doing our homework, it's really easy to take shortcuts. It's really easy to say, Mrs. Gambino isn't checking off if I got the right answer or not. It's not a big deal. It's going to help us when we get to the test to set up these good habits. So yeah, I strongly recommend that you check with the calculator, get in the habit of doing that. So when it comes time to the test, you're checking your answer because that's what you're used to doing and you catch mistakes that you make. Nolan?
Were you going to use our math workbook?
We don't have a math workbook.
No. No.
Oh, the textbook?
Yeah.
That hardcover
You
book?
never said.
So when did I say, what did I say we're doing with that textbook? Jillian?
You said that we can keep it wherever we want, but we can go back there for references.
Yeah, it's a resource for you to have. I don't use the textbook in class, but it is a resource. So let me show you how we use that resource. If we look at the top of our page, we always see this on our objective page. So it says text 2.2. So the first number is our chapter. So this objective comes from chapter 2. Our second digit, that 0.2, is the lesson. So if you get home tonight and you say, I'm not sure about this, I watched the video and the way she's explaining it didn't quite make sense, I'm going to open up my textbook and I'm going to go to chapter 2 lesson 2, and I'm gonna see how the textbook explains it. Because there are many different ways to do math. And sometimes the way that I'm showing you made sense and sometimes it doesn't. So you can always go back to the textbook and see how the textbook explains it. Sometimes they're gonna explain it the exact same way. Sometimes it'll be a little bit different. You might go, oh, I understand that. Got it. And then you can come back to your binder and do your homework. So that textbook is a resource for you, just like my YouTube channel is a resource for you.
Like if you're sick.
Like if you're sick, or like I said, if you get home and you don't remember how to do something, you can go to my YouTube to rewatch the video of what we just did right now, or you could look at your textbook and say, oh, that's how we do it. Some of my friends like to keep their textbook at home. So if mom and dad need to help us with something, we can show them in the book how to do it. We can look that up with our parents to help explain something. Okay? So that's why we have the textbook. It is a resource for us. And that's how we use it. We look at the text or textbook, tells you your chapter and the lesson in that chapter. That was a very good question. With that, I'm going to say to anybody watching at home, we hope you are well, and we hope you have a wonderful day.